According to softschools.com, the Louisiana Purchase took place, doubling the size of the country. By 1840, almost 7 million Americans had migrated westward in hopes of securing land and being prosperous. Thomas Jefferson believed that the nation's future depended on the westward expansion. According to the 8th grade history textbook, each section of the country had developed their own distinctive way of life. This led to sectionalism, the greater loyalty many Americans felt toward their own section than to the country as a whole. Southerners felt the North were threatening their way of life. The North feared South wanted to spread slavery throughout the nation. The North was focused on manufacturing goods and trading. The South was centered on plantation, cash crops, and slavery. The West was constantly getting new settlers and mining.
According to the social studies textbook, expanding democracy, which Americans believed that they had a God-given mission to extend their system of democracy to everyone. Security occupying the middle of the continent from coast to coast, threats from rival powers like England, Spain, or Russia started to appear. Pioneering spirit. The pioneering spirit was seen as the perfect expression of American individualism. Romanticizing the West. Many Americans romanticized the West in paintings, popular prints, and literature as an idea of nature. Both Manifest Destiny and the westward growth of the nation wanted to keep on expanding west so they can gain new territory.
The cause of the U.S.-Mexican War was that shortly after Texas was annexed, a dispute broke out between the U.S. and Mexico over the southern border of Texas. Was that border to be the Rio Grande or the Nueces River? The effect of the U.S.-Mexican War was that the U.S. gained lands such as California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and parts of Colorado and New Mexico. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the U.S. agreed to pay Mexico $15 million for these areas, known as the Mexican Cession. Areas that were required to form the U.S. were California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, parts of Colorado, New Mexico, Louisiana, Florida, and Oregon. Most of this land was gained during the U.S.-Mexican War when we defeated Mexico. Louisiana was gained in 1803 when the U.S. bought it from France. Florida was gained in 1819 when Spain, faced with losing its colonial empire, sells Florida to the U.S. Oregon we achieved in 1846. We achieved it through a treaty with Britain, which settled the border war.
John C. Callahan and Henry Clay had a part in tariffs. Callahan's provision was to tell other countries that the tariff of abomination was unconstitutional and each state had a right to nullify it. Jackson signed into law the tariff, which made some reductions in tariff rates and enforceable in South Carolina. Henry Clay made a compromise that reduced tariffs over the next 10 years. The compromise didn't pass in early 1850s because of the opposition by both pro-slavery Southern Democrats, led by John C. Callahan, and anti-slavery Northern Whig. Daniel Webster was all for the American people. He was an American politician who served twice in the U.S. House of Representatives.
According to the 8th grade history textbook, in the North, skilled craftsmen were replaced by unskilled workers who worked in large factories. The number of workers and inequalities between the rich and the poor increased. Also, the middle class expanded. Also, according to the 8th grade history textbook, in the West, after the constitution of the Erie Canal, farmers could send their produce up the Mississippi River to the Great Lakes over the Erie Canal and down the Hudson River to New York City. Farmers began using machines like the mechanical plow, reaper, and thresher. The West replaced the North as the nation's bread basket. Textbook, the South was growing really high in slavery due to the cotton gin. Over the next 40 years, the plantation system and cultivation of king cotton spreaded. Southern plantations often exhausted the soil, fell into debt, and failed to develop of new tech.
There was now two groups in slavery, pro-slavery and anti-slavery. Pro-slavery, favoring slavery of the continuance of the non-interference. Anti-slavery, opposed to the practice or system of slavery. Henry David Thoreau was jailed for one day after not paying his taxes to protest slavery. The Underground Railroad was a vast network of people who helped fugitive slaves to escape north or to Canada. Slavery had already been abolished there. Harriet Ann Jacobs, a woman slave writer. Her story was very brutal and sexual. No one could believe it. She had escaped and was later freed. Abram Petrovich Ganable, male slave, was a Russian military engineer, general, and nobleman of American origin.
According to social studies textbook, the founding of the Republican Party was founded in 1854. Critics of the Kansas-Nebraska Act formed a new political party, which is the Republican Party. Republicans agreed to let slavery continue in the South, but they opposed any further extensions of slavery into any of the new territories. Lincoln-Douglas debates that Dred Scott decision questioned the power of Congress to control the spread of slavery. In 1858, Lincoln challenged Senator Stephen Douglas, the author of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, to a series of formal debates. He told the listeners that African Americans were human beings with the rights guaranteed by the Declaration of Independence. Lincoln further explained that he favored proper sovereignty, but since African Americans were human beings, no person could claim moral rights to enslave them. The Missouri Compromise in 1820 prohibited slavery in most of Louisiana purchase above the Missouri Compromise line. It set a pattern by admitting one free and one slave state into the Union at the same time, but later failed, which would lead to the Compromise of 1850. This compromise admitted California as a free state. In exchange, Congress passed a tighter fugitive slave law, letting Southern slave owners hunt down slaves who escaped to the North. Then, that would later fail again, which led to Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois proposed this new doctrine, which basically is the people in the new territory would decide for themselves whether they want to become free or they want to be a slave state.
Significant social leader was Harriet Beecher Stowe, who depicted the evils of slavery and stirred the public conscience of the North. Even those who didn't participate in slavery directly were still complicated in it, such as Northern politicians and citizens. A political leader was John Quincy Adams. He returned to Congress after his terms. He spent most of his final years of his political life against the gag rule. The gag rule is a regulation or directive that prohibits public discussion of particular matter in particular. Frederick Douglass was an African-American social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and statesman. Douglass published Life and Times of Frederick Douglass in 1892. He was a former slave with no education, but still produced such an elegant prose.
Mormons were founded in upstate New York in 1830 by Joseph Smith. At the time of the Second Great Awakening, they moved to Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, but they were driven out of these states because of their unique religious beliefs. Their leader was Brigham Young. By the time of Young's death in 1877, 125,000 Mormons lived in Utah. Brigham Young led them westward by covered wagon to the Great Salt Lake in Utah. Why Mormons traveled to Utah was that they wanted to be able to practice their religion freely. Some of the states they traveled to, such as New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, drove them out because of their religious beliefs.
The abolitionist movement was a social and political push for the immediate emancipation of all slaves and the end of racial discrimination and segregation. The movement became bigger in northern churches and politics beginning in the 1830s, which contributed to the regional animosity between North and South leading up to the Civil War.